We are often told that the ground rule of science is methodological naturalism, which comes with an assumption that there is no need to invoke the supernatural in scientific explanations, such as God, angels, jinn, soul or spirit, etc. In other words, the methodology of science is restricted to the study of nature and nature only, or natural phenomena, which in simple terms are any entities that belong to the world of space and time, or any entities that are observed through our five senses, such as heat, spatial dimensions of physical objects, biological processes within living creatures, or even chemical processes within them, and so forth. Now, what we are seldom told is that methodological naturalism has two underlying conceptions, each with a different rationale concerning the role of methodological naturalism in science. So it's not enough to say that science is methodologically naturalistic, period. Rather, there is more to it than just that. We need to ask whether methodological naturalism is a self-imposed intrinsic limitation of science or a pragmatic rule of science which is revocable. For instance, revocable by extraordinary empirical evidence. Whichever opinion we adopt requires an epistemological justification that is scientific. Otherwise, we may be imposing a rule on science which is epistemically justified by non-scientific, unscientific, or even pseudo-scientific means. So if we accept that methodological naturalism is an intrinsic property of science, then we would be committing ourselves to what is called an a priori assumption in science. That is, imposing a rule in science which is independent of experience, or which is not empirically verified. The implications of this could be that investigating unknown natural causes or metaphysical questions would be an unscientific practice. So scientists studying, for example, superstring theory or M theory or even multiverse theories would be in trouble because they may be alleged of doing pseudoscience. Now, the most important argument in support of intrinsic methodological naturalism, or methodological naturalism being the intrinsic rule of science, is an argument from the definition of science. In short, methodological naturalism is simply part of science by definition. But there are critics who argue that what is and what isn't science cannot be settled by merely appealing to a definition. Because appealing to a definition as a justification is logically fallacious. There needs to be a familiarity with the activity and practical characteristics of the enterprise of science and its nature to understand the methodology of science, and not just an appeal to a definition. So argument from the definition doesn't sit comfortably for these critics. On the other hand, what we have is that if we accept methodological naturalism as a pragmatic rule of science, we would be committing ourselves to what is called an a posteriori assumption in science. That is dependent on experience and is also empirically grounded. So scientists who adopt methodological naturalism as a pragmatic rule of science do so because it is proven successful in the past, and therefore there is an assumption that it will also prove successful in the future, and not because science has any intrinsic timeless ground rules, and therefore we must stick to those ground rules of science. The implications of this second opinion, that is, that methodological naturalism is a pragmatic rule of science, are that science can have a bearing on supernatural questions, and supernatural is not necessarily precluded from science. So to summarize the point, methodological naturalism is a pragmatic methodological guideline that emerged from the history of science, and it did not just drop from thin air. It is an a posteriori adoption of a naturalistic methodology, but does not necessarily entail ruling out the supernatural as well as the unknown natural causes. So it may well be that in future science may undergo a paradigm shift in which God talk or supernatural talk may be permitted. So pragmatic methodological naturalism does not reject appeals to the supernatural a priori.